Hey everybody, thank you for joining us for our Redefining the Annual Giving Playbook webinar today. We're going to give some people a little bit of time to get logged in, start settling, maybe grab that last beverage, and we're going to go ahead and get started with our presentation here very soon. We would love for this to be an interactive presentation, so we do have a space for some Q&A. But to start things off, to get us settled here, we have maybe the most important question that we're going to ask today. And we'd like to put your answer in the chat here. We've got a little bit of a Halloween theme that is going on. So we want to know, to start off, what is your favorite Halloween candy? This could be the thing that you buy an extra bag of to hand out. Or if you're like me, it's what you end up taking from your kid's bag at the end of the night, the so-called parent tax. So just drop your answer in the chat. No wrong answers here. We'll take a look and see some of the responses. All right, I got lots of Hershey showing up here in the chat. Milky Way, Snickers. For me, I'm gonna take Five Guy myself. And I don't know if anybody's actually selected that one just yet. Andrew, what about you? Favorite
Man,
Halloween candy?
both Milky Way, growing up, Milky Way and like Three Musketeers, the very like creamy and like chocolate heavy and caramel sauce heavy ones are my favorite. But I've become an adult and like Almond Joy is right underneath it, and 100 Grand is like another one that I love, and like the peanuts heavy ones.
So in other words, there are no wrong choices
Oh
when it's
yeah,
coming
I
to
just
candy here.
my palate has matured, but I do love good sour candy every now and again too. So I see gummy clusters. Starbursts, Sweet Tarts, love that. I mean, these are all it. Milk
Yeah.
Duds, though. Whoa,
Lots of
not your
great
thing.
responses here, and it looks like we've got a good group of people that have joined. So we're going to go ahead and get ourselves started. We've just got a couple, basic housekeeping items right up at the top here. Um, like I said, we'd love to hear questions from you. We're going to be presenting a lot of different content, but as we're going through that, if you've got something that you want us to answer, please drop it into the Q&A feature. We'll be taking a look at that throughout today's webinar. We also have some time at the end that we save to make sure we can get to as many of those questions as possible. But start populating the Q&A. We'll keep tabs on that. Like I said, we've got a lot of content to get through today. So don't worry about jotting down all the notes or capturing everything. We are going to be sending a recording of this webinar within a day. You'll have this within that recording. You'll see the deck and whatnot. So we'll start off a little bit with some quick intros. My name is Zach Corbin, Associate Managing Vice President on the Annual Giving and Digital Marketing team here at BWF. And I get the good fortune of working with a lot of different clients to build out strategies for their annual giving programs and then help them implement and execute those strategies where our focus really is on increasing donor participation and increasing donor revenue to the annual giving program. And I am joined here today by my colleague and my friend, Andrew Chandra. I'll turn it over for Andrew to give a quick introduction here.
Hey, thanks, Zach. Like Zach said, my name is Andrew Chandra. I'm the Director of Digital Strategy for BWF. I also sit on the Annual Giving and Digital Marketing team and have been a big fan of this work for a long, long time. And my primary focus is to turn this, the large amounts of marketing data that our clients have into some really actionable insights that we can be leveraged to develop some innovative digital-first solutions, typically the most accessible channel for most of our clients and most of the folks in this industry.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue to talk about what we're here to discuss today, right? And we've been really excited about the chance to build out this webinar because I think we get a chance to work with a lot of different clients and we get a chance to see a lot of different annual giving operations. And it's that vantage point that really gives us some unique insights where we can start to see what some of these trends are that we're seeing. And I think we could probably all agree that we're in this moment where we need to change some of the things that we are doing to meet the demands of the modern donor. But I think more than anything, we love to see the hunger for innovation that exists across annual giving, all parts of the nonprofit vertical. there's a real desire to change what's going on here. And that's why we're here today, because we want to package some of the things that we're seeing into digestible formats and give you some takeaways that you can actually implement and act on today. So, we're going to talk a little bit about the current landscape and why change is not a luxury anymore. It's really more of a necessity. We're going to touch on some of these tools that are really ubiquitous: AI, automation, how we can get those into our workflows. We're also going to tackle looking at annual giving campaigns through a different lens, starting with the audience first and not with the campaign first, kind of a reversal of what we traditionally have been doing. And then we're going to tackle tactics, the things we should be doubling down on, and the things that we should be looking to sunset or retire. We're putting all that together in what we're calling the modern annual giving playbook, which we're actually having a white paper that's going to be published here in the next month or so that is redefining the annual giving playbook. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But this is all insights. This is all things you can take back and use today. We're not going to come at you with advice like switch your CRM out or change your tech stack up, hire 5 more people to do the work. This is advice that you're going to be able to act on regardless of your current setup. And so we're able to host this webinar thanks to our firm BWF. And at BWF, there's a lot of different service areas, but annual giving and the everyday donor is really important to us. We care about them. We do not believe that donor decline is inevitable. We don't think that you have to accept that at the status quo. Our firm has been active leaders in the annual giving space. We actually held the first Giving Day 1 year before Giving Tuesday ever kicked off. We've been doing some studies on things like lifetime donor value, which we'll include in our follow-up email. And now we're holding this webinar. So a couple more facts about BWF. As a firm, we have been around for over 4 decades, and we've had the good fortune to work with clients all across the world, collaborating with them to help raise billions of dollars to further their missions. And yes, we're talking about annual giving, digital marketing today, but we are a comprehensive firm, and we do a lot of other services. We've got a few of them listed on the screen right here. Our team of data scientists and our decision science team, who are pioneering smarter segmentation through the use of their tool Donor AI. Our strategic communications team, who can help you build out things like marketing personas and craft the messaging that's going to activate and inspire the people who fit into those personas. And our donor experience and donor relation team, we're making big strides in creating a better donor experience in order to try to increase and lift donor retention rates. But today, we're here to talk about annual giving. And I think what we see kind of across the board is a bit of a complicated picture. We're at this kind of fork in the road, this inflection point right now where the decisions that we are making this year and next are going to have a compounding effect on annual giving performance over the next half decade or decade. And so it's really important that we're putting our best foot forward here. I know Anshu's been paying a lot of attention to this. Anshu, talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing and kind of the current landscape and some of the things that are happening right now.
Yeah, yeah. If it feels like fundraising has gotten harder, that's because it has. Right now, we're seeing donor expectations change quite a bit, and our donors are expecting us to be, more relevant when communicating with them. There's more transparency, more personalization. But most teams are being asked to deliver with less, less budget, less bandwidth, fewer people. And we've been using the same playbook for decades, direct mail, phone-a-thons, email blasts, and it worked up until this point. And now donor behaviors have changed faster than some of our systems have. So the rules of engagement are different, right? The donors are being more selective about where they give. They're used to having seamless digital experiences everywhere else, and now we're expecting that in our work. And they can smell inauthenticity a mile away, right? So everyone's feeling this squeeze, and you're not alone in that. The question is right now isn't about are we doing enough? It's very much of are we doing the right things? And the good news is that the path forward isn't about starting over. It's about rewriting the playbook that got us here with smarter tools and stronger storytelling. So let's take a quick pulse check. Tell us how confident you're feeling in your current annual giving strategy for 2026.
Give a couple more seconds here for everybody else to fill out that poll. Thanks for dropping the responses in there. All right. I think that we've got some good, let's see.
Okay, so it's exactly, as we would expect. This is on a bell curve, which is to be expected, right? And we've got some folks that are here that are already testing and adopting new tactics, and others who are still trying to make sense of what to prioritize next. Somewhat confident is great, but for those that are ahead of the curve, I hope that today is a bit of a validation for you and a chance to see where, how your early moves align with what's working across the sector. For those that maybe feel a little bit behind, you're absolutely not alone. The landscape has been moving very, very quickly, and the goal today isn't to make you feel like you're behind. It's to help you see a clear path forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly what to do next with the fewer things that will make the big. So the current landscape, right? Let's ground this conversation in reality. Look at any study over the past decade. They show that donor participation, especially amongst base level and mid-level donors, have declined across almost every sector. Right. We saw a study recently from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project that has already shown an 11.1% decline in donor counts amongst the $100 or below group in quarter 1 of this year already. Right. And that's not great. Retention rates are holding steady, which is good news for now, because it means that donors aren't necessarily walking away. However, stagnation is usually the first sign of decline. We're not gaining enough new ones to offset the loss. All at the same time, CASE, AFP surveys are showing us most fundraising teams are reporting flat or declining budgets despite these increased expectations from leadership and donors across the board. And many of these annual giving programs are being asked to drive campaign level results without campaign level resources. And this gap is only widening, between expectation and capacity, between what donors expect from us and what our teams are equipped to actually deliver. But it's, there's a silver, I'm a toxic optimist. So there's an encouraging part where the gap can be closed. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Tools like automation, behavioral data, and AI are helping teams punch above their weight class and freeing up time to focus on the things that truly move the needle, like winning donor attention through strategy, storytelling, and stewardship. It's not doom and gloom. It's opportunity. Because when we modernize how we work, we don't just keep up, we start to pull ahead. So if that's the landscape, more pressure, fewer resources, rising donor expectations, then the question becomes, how do we adapt? That's where smarter tools, stronger strategy, and the modern playbook come in.
Yeah, and continuing with the Halloween theme here, we've got a quote that's going to introduce each section, and I think kind of as Andrew was hinting at, this is probably the best opportunity in recent memory that we have to be able to work more efficiently. And so you're going to hear some of these trends throughout this conversation. It's not about rehauling everything. It's really about kind of trying to keep it simple and streamline the process. And so I thought this quote was great because this is what this next section is all about. It's bringing smarter ideas to life. The challenge in annual giving it's never been about effort. It's about working more efficiently, right? Every single week it feels like there's a new tool, a new tactic that is supposed to make our jobs easier, but somehow it becomes one of those extra things that we've got to go ahead and manage on top of everything else, right? I'm sure everybody on this call can relate, but you got to wear a lot of different hats in the annual giving world and advancement. You got to be a marketer, a data analyst, a strategist, a writer, fill in the blank. And so, the question isn't how do we add more and do more? It's how do we take what we're doing and work a little bit smarter, work a little bit more efficiency. And that's where some of these systems come in. Automation, AI, process design, they're actually going to give you some time back in your day. So we want to talk a little bit about that, where we are seeing some of the pain and where we think we can get some of that energy back here. And so this is really reinforcing a lot of what Andrew was just talking about with the current landscape. Kind of like to think about it that we really only have three finite buckets when it comes to our work. We've got time, we've got the people who are actually doing the work, and then we've got our budgetary resources, right? And so we're being asked to do a lot without seeing those buckets increase. We've all been there. right? Trying to juggle platforms or tech stacks that don't interconnect or talk to each other, trying to figure out the right message to deliver at the right time to the right audience, handling those last second requests that come through, and all of a sudden half of your work week is gone. And so this really isn't about anybody doing the wrong things. We're just doing them in a harder way, right? A much more manual, labor intensive way. All of that manual work is going to eat into time that we could be spending on strategy, on storytelling, connection. That's the work that actually moves people from prospective donor to donor, right? Getting those people to invest in our organizations. We are glass half full people, though. We do think that there is a great path forward. There's a way out of the cycle, and it doesn't mean rehauling your tech stack or anything else like that. And I also want to make sure we're hammering this point home that, we see AI as a tool that can move us towards greater efficiency. The goal is not to replace people with the tools. It's to make the tools work for your people, right? AI, automation cannot replace building relationships. They cannot replace connection. That's at the heart of fundraising. That's the heart of annual giving. But it can give you some more time to focus on that work. And so when you think about automation, starting with something simple, think about an email marketing campaign, for example. We've got all these people who are opening it and they're clicking through, and maybe they're not making that gift. Consider setting up some sort of an automated or a kicker email that goes to people who clicked on a link, but didn't make that gift, right? That's something we can set up to run and follow up with them 3 hours later, a day later, whatever the tactic calls for. Or maybe we're pulling in a lot of different teams when we're trying to plan out some of our annual giving campaigns, and we've got a creative brief or intake form that gets filled out. Consider automating that, where once that is completed with all the pertinent information, it sends an email right out to all the parties who need to be seeing that, need to be aware of that. And then a bonus step, can we go ahead and automate adding that into our project management system, right? And so there's little things I think that we can try to identify what are tasks that we're doing week in and week out that take up a little bit of time. But if we can save 15 minutes here, half an hour there, that's a compounding effect over time that over the course of the year, we're saving days worth of time. And then how we view AI is really, this is the accelerant. So automation is the one thing that can really free up a lot of your bandwidth. AI can take the time and really accelerate what you're able to do from the output standpoint. So things like, generating first drafts, or, being on a Zoom call and using an AI summary or something like that to recap the meeting and make sure you've got all those action steps outlined. Really, anything when it comes to, different channels, you can reformat your content and take something that's email and try to fit it into what is a social media post or what does a text message look like here. Do it very quickly, scaling that work, accelerating our work. They're not big transformations, right? It's small, sustainable steps, but you pile those up, they're going to add up very quickly, especially if we can spread them across our teams. And that's the real win here. Shifting energy back to connection, back to storytelling. Those are the parts of fundraising that have to be human-centric. You just cannot replace the human with these tools. And so when it comes to, what are some of the things that you're going to be able to take away and implement right now, today? A couple different action items for you here. Everything that we're talking about, I think sometimes when we look at all these different tools that are out there, it can be overwhelming, right? And all of a sudden it's like, well, how do I use this thing to the fullest ability? Start small and identify some things that you can pilot and work on, and then scale it up from there. And so, first, a lot of this automation or AI is only as good as the information that we are feeding it. I think we all have probably been trained on this in the CRM sense that good data in equals good data out. Same thing is true for things like AI. Your inputs are going to determine what your outputs are. So the more we can standardize and be consistent, templatize things, that is also going to create some efficiency for how we actually use these tools. Automation, we gave some examples in the previous slide, but just pick one of those things that happens over and over again and find a way to try to automate that. Prove it once, build momentum, and think about an action or a behavior that you might be able to do I think a really good example is something like a first-time donor gift, right? So somebody who's coming into your organization and making their first ever gift, we want to try to retain that donor. It's a lot costlier to try to go back and reacquire them. So we've got this opportunity to retain them, but maybe we want to move beyond your traditional tax receipts, right? So map out what touch points that person should get. What happens a day after? What happens a week after? What about a month down the road? You can build all of that out, and then there's a lot of different tools you can use. If you've got Salesforce Marketing Cloud, you've got HubSpot, Campaign Monitor, many of these tools have journeys that are built into them. Map that out, implement that. And in the case we're talking about, your KPI is first time donor retention rate. What did that look like before? What does it look like after you start to implement some of these solutions here? And then last, AI, I'm sure we're all trying to wrestle with, what exactly this should look like. Just to state the obvious, we can't ignore this. It has to be integrated into our work, right? It's got to be embraced. The use cases here are endless. We could probably spend an entire other webinar just on the use cases of AI. But it's everywhere, right? And I think probably the most ubiquitous is generative AI. That's what you're seeing with things like ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot. If you pop into Canva, there's an image generator there. You can be mapping journeys out in Google Mind Maps, or use ChatGPT to help you build a cadence out. Whatever it is when it comes to the work, there are probably things you could identify as, hey, these are tools we can put in place to accelerate that work. And if you train your team up on this, it honestly becomes like adding an extra team member over time. So not trying to replace people, just trying to accelerate the work that we're capable of doing using AI. I'll give one more example, which is directly related to this work, but not in a direct response or strategic sense. I think creating things like shared knowledge bases on tools like Notion is incredibly important for annual giving operations. Essentially, what a knowledge base is you drop everything that's pertinent to your operation. This could be past appeals, this could be your brand guidelines, it could be anything and everything about annual giving. Basically, like a Wikipedia for your annual giving operation that people can go one-stop shop. This is great for collaboration with teams outside of annual giving. You can point them to this directory, they can get questions answered. It's also a fantastic way to onboard and train new staff, where you can direct them to go to this knowledge base, poke around, ask questions, learn a little bit more. So then when those new hires come back to you, their questions are more focused. You're having a little bit more substantive conversation, a little bit more depth to the conversation. And then just shared visibility overall is a huge time saver when it comes to that. So that's some of our favorite things there. But these tools, automation, AI, everything we're talking about, are really designed to help accelerate and free up bandwidth for our work. One of the most important parts of what we do, obviously, comes in the form of annual giving campaigns. And I think we've been kind of approaching those a little bit. We'll get to that just in a second, but I want to hear from you. If you could save yourself 2 hours a week by making all of these tools work together, that's 2 hours back for creativity, strategy, all the stuff we talked about. It's never that easy. We want to hear from you. What is your biggest barrier to implementing some of these tools? Is it a time issue, right? Is it a lack of understanding of training and how to implement some of this stuff? Is it the thought of adding one more tool into the system and we don't want to do that with a fragmented tech stack? Or is it something else entirely? And if it's something else entirely, if you're hitting that other button, drop that into the chat so we can know what exactly it is that's preventing some of this from happening. So we'll give a little bit more time for people to fill things out here. And it's really interesting to see, how some of these results are shaping up. We'll share them in just a second. Again, if you're hitting other, drop that into the chat. We want to hear from you. If it's not listed on the choices in the polls, what's the biggest barrier for you? All right, let's see. So this is a little bit different result-wise than I think we might have been expecting. And I know there's some irony to the first one here of we're talking about saving time, but we don't necessarily have the time. So I just want to be cognizant that this is a front-loaded effort, right? There's going to be a lot of time that's going to need to be invested to getting these things set up and set up in the right way. But I would say that that investment has a very clear ROI at the end of the day if we're thinking about what it's going to help us do in the future, right? What is implementing this going to do for us in 6 months, in 12 months? How is it going to impact the outcomes of our work? Lack of training, not sure where to start. Yeah, I think that's something where, there's a lot of different resources out there, but which ones do we look to, right? What do we do here? I see some thoughts in the chat. People have gotten burned in the past on automation making mistakes, right? Making sure that we're doing the testing and the QA before we're trotting that out. But even if we do, sometimes it's not perfect. We've got some things around data, regulation, safety. So I think at the end of the day, probably what we're hearing is there's a real desire to do some of this stuff, but there's some things that are preventing us from putting it into action. And so it's a great takeaway for us. I think we might be having a future webinar topic that popped up right here, but we want to move on. I was getting into this a little bit before about the most important things that we're doing. A lot of times we think about starting an annual giving calendar with campaigns, but I want to toss it over to Andrew because he's been putting a lot of thought into maybe we have that wrong.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I was just actually shout out to Drew Kaufman for dropping in a tip. Monday.com gives you 10 free seats if you're set up as a that's their standard NPO discount. Love that. Thanks, Drew. All right, I got distracted by the chat. I love a good tip like that. All right, so the I chose this quote. It's just a bunch of hocus pocus, not because my niece and I just watched this movie for the first time this week. It's also because that's how sometimes donors feel when they get three different appeals in the same week from the same organization. Because your audience isn't thinking in campaigns like we are; they're thinking in connections. So the problem, it's starting with our calendar. How often our fundraisers, like us, are opening their calendar to look at fiscal year response, fiscal year dates, their internal deadlines, campaign themes. These are things that donors don't see. They only see what we put out in front of them. And so when we start with what's important to us, what's our priority, we remove them from the center, which is what audience message or first messaging is centering that strategy around who we're talking to, not what we want them to say. So, going into the other components of this inconsistent, high intensity, excuse me, I lost my track there. Inconsistent high intensity cadences. Messaging that breaks the narrative because of how inconsistently people are hearing from you and it goes from dead silence for a while to our giving day is coming up and it's 15 emails for 4 weeks straight and it gets even busier towards the end of that timeline. And this in the same vein, inconsistent messaging. So if your emails sound different from your social posts and they'll sound different from what your leadership messages are, donors will question the authenticity and begin asking questions like, who are you as an organization? And do you even know what your priorities are? Right? Internally, this intensity is burning out teams. I mean, we're seeing it time and time again, where we're ramping up every quarter to send this appeal and putting a bunch of thought into content and just pumping it out, trying to measure success, trying to tweak as we go along. It's just not doing enough. And one thing that you'll see, if I can make a plug, I think Zach, you already talked about the white paper that we worked on. The theme in there is that consistency beats intensity every time, right? You don't need massive pushes every quarter. What you need is regular, steady engagement that makes donors feel like they're a part of the ongoing conversation. How do we do that? When the other issue is silent storytelling. Don't go backwards, Zach. And silent storytelling is just going to be this fragmented donor experience that just kind of comes as a byproduct, right? So too often each team or unit crafts their own message, and the results in this duplication of efforts. And the through line becomes confusing to donors, right? Campaigns are overlapping, messages are competing, and the donor journey is disjointed. And like I said, if your story sounds different on every channel, your donors notice. It's not just inefficient, it's eroding trust and engagement over time. So this mindset shift is not about just messaging, it's about alignment across every channel, every team, every department. So as we're talking about the opportunity, it's now our time to bring some clarity and connection to this disjointed journey. This model that we've kind of coined together is uh, audience first, messaging in the middle. And really what we're trying to do is unify messaging by asking the who, the what, and the why. before we get to the when, because the when is important. It's relevance, right? Which means that you're showing donors that we understand them, their motivations, their timing, and what we value and what they value most. But if we only focus on relevance without consistency, the message becomes opportunistic, and it may feel like we're changing the story every time we send a new appeal. That brings us to consistencies, right? Consistency builds trust. Donors should be able to recognize your voice, your tone, your story somewhat instantaneously, and no matter on what channel they're looking at, right? But if you have too much consistency without empathy, it feels robotic and repetitive. Like we're just checking a box by constantly pumping out content that has messaging that's a mile wide, but only an inch deep, and it's not resonating with them. So this is where empathy is turning that message into a conversation. It's what makes a donor feel seen and heard, right? If you lean in too hard into empathy, though, without a clear, relevant ask, all you've done is created a feeling of warmth, but without any movement behind it. Donors feel good, but they don't know what to do next because we haven't given them a clear, relevant ask. So the magic in this mix is really just the balance. That's what builds connection and conversion, right? So the action step here is to implement the modern approach. And the modern approach is taking this old playbook where we're sending mass campaign blasts that are segmented by the limited segmentation, demographic segmentation that we have, all coupled with a generic appeal. We're getting rid of that. And in order to build up this capacity to change the way we're going to engage with donors, we're going to do that by implementing the modern approach, which is taking that journey-based messaging, segmentation by behavior, and personalizing the story that we're telling these folks. And essentially what you've done is, again, you've stopped starting with campaign-centric strategy, and you've started with the who, the what, and the why, audience-centric strategy. So these are some of these tactics that we want to start burying. And Zach, I think you're going to talk about this right now as you pull up my favorite quote probably in the entire webinar.
Yeah, and this I think this is an important thing and sometimes a difficult thing for us to think about is a lot of times we're in the mindset of what do we need to add when the mindset should be what do we need to take away, right? How do we simplify things? And so sometimes certain tactics just should stay buried. Every organization has a few things that we keep alive because, and stop me if you have heard this before, it's what we've always done. Right? Just think about some of those things. You probably have a short list already popping into your head, a newsletter that has been sent out for the past decade that is just not getting the same engagement or activity. A generic piece of direct mail that has always been attached to a campaign that the ROI has been going down year over year. Sometimes those are the things that really do need a proper send-off because if we're hanging on to the tactics that are outdated, we're missing chances to double down on what works. That's what we want to talk about right now. This is a slide that basically has been talked about in a couple different ways today, but I know this is something everybody's feeling is just being stretched thin. We're trying to use every channel and every tactic that we have in our toolkit, email, direct mail, text, paid, social, ambassadors, but the results, even as we implement some of these things, are just not where we want them to be. No matter what we try, it is just harder and harder to capture attention. It's harder to inspire action. And again, this problem is nothing about effort. It's a little bit about focus, though. So if you're still batch blasting everybody who has ever given at any point, in their life to your organization, that is spending some of those finite buckets, some of that time, some of that money on an audience that is probably not going to respond if they have not been giving in the past 10 years, 15 years, you name it. That is budget, that's bandwidth. We can redirect to the things that are actually moving the needle. That is what we want to get into right now. So when we think about some of the things that we see that are really working well, I think the first one is probably the most important thing. We're not talking or thinking enough about behavioral marketing data. And so, just so we're all on the same page, behavioral marketing data is what it sounds like. It's the things that our people are doing across our various marketing channels, right? This is a game changer because this is real-time data. If you think about data that's in the CRM, as soon as it's in there, it's out of date. This is real-time action here. I think there's a refocus that is needed where we are going to focus on behavior and intent as the strong signals of what future action is going to look like. Because the data is all around us, right? Look at the people who are opening, are clicking, they're watching content, they're visiting our site. We have access to all those different data points. We can leverage all of those different data points. We need to start talking to the people who are doing those things or getting closer to making those gifts. You need to talk to those people differently. A smaller, higher intent audience will always perform a large, cold audience. Bears out in the metrics across a variety of different channels. It's truly a quality over quantity situation. If you think back to the email marketing example we talked about with automation, taking a look at people who are clicking but not giving, sending out the automated email, that's an example of behavioral marketing. We're taking that data, we're using it, we're automating the process. We're getting a little bit closer to conversion for those people who clicked but didn't give. Some of the things that are tried and true, in fundraising, this is a relationship-driven business, and it will always will be. And so we still see really good returns when it comes to peer-to-peer efforts or ambassador programs. And the reason is pretty simple. With a lot of social science, right, network theory, people are more likely to give to people that they know and trust with an ask versus having that from an institutional or organizational voice, right? And so part of that is tapping into second or third degree networks here. Homophily, the birds of a feather flock together. That really lets us reach out to those different networks. And so if we get people amplifying the messaging and the marketing efforts and the outreach that we want, we're going to start to see some outsized returns. And anecdotally, what we typically see is if you've got an ambassador or peer-to-peer program and those people are active, they're bringing anywhere from 3 to 7 gifts per ambassador. Now, just imagine if you have 50 of those people amplifying your message, or 100, and then you multiply by the gifts that they're able to bring in. All of a sudden, we're talking about increasing donor counts to our organization without totally reinventing our marketing strategy. And then we're also seeing, just a lot of success in the paid digital space. This is an area where I feel like some organizations have just started to dip a toe in, but I want to turn this over to Anshu because I just love the way that he approaches this work, thinks about this work in the paid digital space. Anshu, talk to us a little bit about why nonprofits really start to need to invest here and some of the things that they're able to do when they do that.
Yeah, great angle for us to take this here, and Zach, because you're right. I mean, we're seeing a lot of momentum here, and this is work that you, myself, and our team has implemented in real time and seen some real success behind it. Paid digital retargeting tactics are proven multipliers. They keep your message in front of your constituents who already know you and want to act. An example that I can use here, and what it could look like in practice is, let's say someone visits your giving page, but doesn't make that gift after weeks or days of engaging with their content, but has not converted. Bummer, yes, but I mean it's known to happen, right? Now, if we want to employ retargeting, a tactic there to that same person, not necessarily with brand new creative, but with reminders that are reinforcing that same story that they already know and care about, they're that much more likely to convert. And what this can look like is, for example, we're in the middle of calendar year end, planning and execution. You build all this wonderful warming and engagement ahead of the ask, but let's say they get to giving page, but don't make that conversion. We've got a few days left before, December 31st, 11:59 p.m. comes. There's time for us to start targeting specifically those folks with a message that's much more urgent, and is leaning more into the logical part of their brains rather than the emotional, because we've been doing that work, right? So, and the data backs us up. This is a practice that WordStream put out a few update a few weeks ago or months ago in 2024, that said that retargeting audiences are 70% more likely to convert than cold audiences. So that makes the email mass blasts a little bit moot there, and even small investments in retargeting tactics like think like $500 to $1,000 can lift conversion rates across your email and direct mail campaigns, which already cost direct mail costs a lot of money. So to have this tactic in your back pocket to complement and lift those efforts up shows results. I mean, obviously can't do this with just about every channel you have. It's not about that. The key is focus, right? Because not all placements are created equal. Retargeting on Meta and display networks tend to drive a bit more of that awareness engagement we're talking about, but retargeting them through search, which we'll touch about that some other time, because uh, AI is changing search a little bit, but video is still top of the tier, and it's often catching people at that moment where they're ready to give. And this is a classic multi-touch donor journey pattern that's been confirmed by Next After's testing over the last couple of years. So again, it's not about being everywhere; it's about being present where your donors already are. I like to think this is digital stewardship, keeping your story in the donor's line of sight until they're ready to act. And you combine that with the behavioral data that Zach is talking about earlier, knowing who's opening, clicking, visiting, watching, you start to see a full picture of engagement. And that's how you make your marketing dollars go further without shouting louder.
Yeah, I love that. And I just want to make a quick note too. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat, which are awesome. If you do have questions, just make sure to try to park those in the Q&A section, just so we can make sure that we can answer those in a little bit here. But the last thing is, I think, really important it's not about shouting louder. It's about showing up in the right places, right? And so there's probably a common theme we're going to see here, which is your outcomes aren't going to be driven by the size of the audience you're reaching out to, right? And that's true across a variety of different channels. I think probably the biggest offender we see is in the email marketing space, where we just pull in kind of everybody we can in the system, and we send out these emails. And sometimes I think that's done because we don't consider the cost, right? There is no cost for sending out the email necessarily, but there is an opportunity cost there. So when we send out these emails to unengaged or cold audiences, we actually can do things like hurt our deliverability rates, hurt domain reputation. These are the type of things that are going to park us in the promo tabs or things like that, where if we send it to smaller groups who have been engaging with some of this content, that's better for us. We're going to show up in the right places, and we're going to show up to an audience that's warm and ready for that. So reconsidering some things on email. Direct mail, it's definitely not something that we feel is dead. We see good, solid ROI on direct mail still. Unsegmented direct mail, though, is dead. That's the sort of thing where you're sending out a piece to a lot of different people and the return has steadily been decreasing. Take a look at your data. Who gives through direct mail? Or who gives during a certain campaign where direct mail was a key touch point in there? You can start to shrink your segmentation down a little bit. So we're not mailing out to Cybunts from 5 years ago or long lapse donors, where we could probably think about reallocating some of that print budget to more scalable channels like paid digital, with Anshu just talked through. And then another one where we really shouldn't be widening the audience, but it's text. Text is really kind of like a personal channel. And I don't think this is something that we've necessarily got right just yet. It shouldn't be just kind of like a mass alert. We want to save that for smaller, high touch options, right? So let's go back to that example where we're emailing that automated email of people who click through, didn't make a gift. We could actually look to take that audience and text them, right? And so there's an option there, assuming that opted in and everything. There's an option for some of that cross-channel integration here too. And then obviously going back to what Andrew said about unifying message and making sure we don't have too many competing asks out there. A little bit of air traffic control or governance in terms of what is going out in front of these prospective donor audiences, try to eliminate those overlapping campaigns. And then, the last part here with segmentation, demographics are not a segmentation strategy. When we're segmenting by age or class year or what somebody did a decade ago, it's not necessarily the most indicative of what they're going to do here in the future. That's where we try to look at behavior, engagement. Those are the new drivers. Those are the things that are going to help us predict more about what somebody's going to do today, our warm audiences versus our cold audiences. So like we introed this section, sometimes we do have to get rid of some things. Cutting some of these will free up time and budget. But I want to give you some action steps. We talked a little bit about what to stop doing, what to start doing. I think the most important thing we could do, though, is marry our marketing metrics with our annual giving metrics. This is what gives us that holistic view of annual giving and success. So what am I talking about? We have a campaign debrief to talk about how it performed. What are we looking at? We're looking at the top line figures here, donors in the door, dollars in the door. We need to bring some other metrics, some other marketing data points to the table. Annual giving work, largely direct response work. Direct response work happens via direct marketing channels. So ask yourself, when you're having these debriefs, are you looking at what the web analytics show you? And if there's friction in your giving form, are you looking at what your email marketing or your other digital channel performance looks like? That's going to really help us identify where people are getting stuck in that funnel or that flywheel, depending on whatever your model is. The more we look at this, the more we can optimize. But, we covered a lot of ground. I want to hear from everybody here. What is working? What's not? If you had to pick one area to reevaluate at your organization, what is that going to be? Is it, stopping those mass email blasts? Is it refining our text messaging strategy? Is it taking a look at that peer-to-peer program and saying, well, we might need to reconfigure, retool this, or is it investing more in paid digital and some of those retargeting efforts to try to get the lift that we are talking about, not only on paid digital, but honestly across a variety of different channels here? Go ahead, select your answer in the poll, and we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the responses here as they're coming in. We'll give this a couple more seconds. Get your thoughts in there. Same thing though, if you are answering other, we'd love to hear what that is. Drop it in the chat. And then just another reminder, if you got specific questions, populate those in our Q&A section. We're going to be getting to those questions here shortly. All right. So I think we've got all our results in here. You can see far and away, almost half of the people who responded here, email marketing. I think I'm right there with you. We've been seeing just a steady decline in email marketing. Obviously, we've got inflated open rates that are working against measuring true performance. Take a look at your click to open rate percentage and see where that has been trending over the past couple of years. My guess is it's probably continuing to go down. Smarter segmentation. There's a couple different things we can do here, but I really do think that the more we get our hands around list hygiene and trying to figure out deliverability efforts, the more we're going to see email marketing improve. Don't have to reach out to everybody in our base to get the conversions we want. All right. We're going to keep rolling here. We've got a couple more slides that we want to make sure we get to, but we also want to make sure we're getting to your questions. I'm going to let Andrew talk a little bit about the future and what that is going to look like here.
I'm doing my best to keep up with these questions. Everyone's asking fantastic questions. So I'm gonna try and go through this fairly quickly, but let me know if I'm going too fast. So, confession, when I was writing this slide out, I couldn't help but think of TLC's song "Water." Don't go chasing water. Yeah, but and that's it, right? Like they're warning us a little bit. So let's remix it for 2026. It's don't go chasing trends. The organizations that will be doing well in this space are not chasing trends because, like TLC tells us, the future of annual giving isn't about the next big thing, the next big trend. It's about deepening the fundamentals that are already working, right? That means being efficient and smarter with the tools and time that you're able to, the tools that you're able to implement to save time, automate what can be automated, scale from there so your team can focus on strategy and relationships, right? We're increasing relevancy by keeping our donors at the center of our story and not the campaign calendar, right? The more these organizations do to align with donor motivations, the less they have to do sell their mission and their work, right? And one of the other things is connection is a through line, right? Donors still give because they believe in stories, not strategies, right? So the technology is simple and how we can scale that feeling for ourselves, but then I'll save the time for ourselves, but scale that feeling for them. So the future isn't about adding more complexity. It's about clarity and doing fewer things better with purpose. And when you think about this, and the new playbook really isn't about digital versus personal. It's digital and personal. And that's how you keep fundraising human, even in a world that's becoming increasingly automated. So let's see what, we have another poll for you and want to learn about what you want to learn next. We've already got a couple of themes emerging from the questions we've been asked and want to make sure that we're tailoring our content to what people have on top of mind. All right, let's see. Catching up on some chats here. Okay. Zach, while we wait, should we move on to our upcoming webinar here?
Let's start tackling some questions, actually. I think this
Okay,
might be a
perfect.
good chance here. Um, so there's some really good questions, and I know everybody's been popping stuff into the chat too. Thank you so much for that. There's a question about texting to young alumni who are non-donors. If you're working in higher ed annual giving, solving for young alumni giving is one of the most pressing issues, I think, right? Future pipeline right there. If you drop the class year in the text, does that personalization increase likelihood to respond? So I will say it's a great direction to try to move, right? Anytime we can pull in some things for personalization, sure. But I don't think that's a situation where we can just message out to the entire class of 2018 or 2019, whatever that class year is. We're much more likely to get good conversation, which is one of the keys with text. We want that to be somewhat conversational with people who have kind of raised their hand in some way, shape, or form through behavioral marketing data and are more warmed. Would definitely not suggest going out to a texting audience with a cold ask there. So, great question. We've got another one that is specifically, I've seen a couple of these pop up, specifically around budgets when it comes to paid digital. I think this is a great question. It's also a very complicated question, which is why I'm going to let Andrew jump in here and answer your question. But some examples of how to kind of craft budgets or what you may be able to do with $500 to $1,000, right? Kind of a limited small spend. Andrew, thoughts there?
Yeah, it is a complicated response because it is so dependent on many variables, right? We think about the size of our audience that we're targeting, the channel in which we want to be leveraging, this budget and this work on. I know Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn are kind of the power three, and Facebook and Instagram can almost be, paired into one with Meta because it can help you with distributing to those channels through one. Um, more directly to answer, $500 to $1,000 is a perfect amount to start testing that awareness, engagement, and maybe some high end of the low or the bottom of the funnel activities. So conversion, maybe not donation, but email signups or text messaging signups or whatever else, right? And I personally like Meta a bit more for our testing ground because their cost per impressions are typically a little bit lower. Their costs per clicks are typically a little bit lower. Their retargeting opportunities or retargeting uh, capabilities are a bit better. And it's just a nice, and you get two channels for the cost of one, technically Facebook and Instagram. LinkedIn is great if you're trying to maintain that presence in the professional space where you have young alumni professionals in their early careers, anywhere to people that are and could be potential institutional or corporate donors or sponsors, and having a connection with them in some degree. Now, I have to warn you, CPC, CPM, cost per impressions are a bit higher here because it is a more selective and a smaller platform compared to Facebook and Instagram. So again, it's a very long answer to say that it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, how many people you're targeting, what the timeline looks like, and what your intent is.
Yeah, I think, another note is start small, right? That's been a theme we've been talking about today is start small, find those things you can test. And when you find the things that work, like it's great for message testing, you name it, scale those efforts then, right? And that's going back to doubling down on the things that really work well. We've got some questions around texting. Questions around, do we need a texting platform? How do you kind of use it? I think the question is, how does that fit into your strategy, right? It's not like just because we're going to take the tool and insert it into the operation, all of a sudden we're going to get waves of new donors. But if you're missing some of that personal connection and you want to try to do that in a scalable way, could be a good option for you. Um, a lot of times we see texting work where there are urgent or time-bound communications where we can kind of pull on that lever a little bit. We actually see this work really well for things like pledge fulfillment reminders or monthly anniversary touch points, on the year or 6 month anniversary of the last gift. It's those sorts of things where, again, kind of taking that audience, slimming the segmentation down, reaching out to them at the right time there. Great questions around that. Um, Good questions around donor acquisition. What the best tactics or strategies are paths forward here. Andrew, I want to let you weigh in here in a second. But I think, the question is, had a component of is direct mail dead or something like that? And the answer is no channel really is dead necessarily. It's kind of how they interplay and mix with each other. But I'm actually going to say that the best donor acquisition strategy is actually donor retention. It's one of those things that we are overlooking. We didn't even get to that too much today, right? And I think a lot of times it's because we do all the hard work of getting donors in the door, then we move to the next thing. We need to refocus on how we can retain those donors because not only is it more cost effective, the lifetime donor value is just substantially higher the more we can get people to give. And if we can get them at that 3 year consecutive giving mark, you're going to see those retention rates really skyrocket. So that's the plan we need to put in place. Andrew, any thoughts there to add here to that question?
No, I would 100% agree. The best donor acquisition strategy is the ones that you already have. And I mean, M&R's benchmarking data that just came out in 2024 said that, we're holding steady across the sectors at a 42%. For donors acquired through digital means, it's about 47%. So that's a pretty high retention rate. And if we're not paying attention to these folks that are consistently putting their hands up and showing up in the, in whatever capacity they can, and we move on to the other, don't be shocked if that number starts to slip. And I can't really speak to list buying being an outdated tactic or not. Personally, my preferred tactic is digital. It's in my title, it's in my blood, and it's usually the most approachable, and accessible platform for folks to get into. I did want to answer another question here that's talking about, I think, omni-channel approach. And the question is, this person has had a consultant tell them to be careful about segmenting donors based on the channels they respond to. They thought that direct mail messages, even if someone didn't give, might get a donor ready to respond positively to an email or phone-a-thon call they might receive. This is exactly what omni-channel strategy is you're talking to that person in multiple different ways so that they're responding to one through line messages. And we've done this kind of in a different way. So we've targeted folks that are typically only responding via the finite group of donors that are giving only via mail but have not given in a while, Libunts or Sibunts. We've started a warming and engagement campaign that lets them know they're about to get something in the mail and what it includes, and having that message come from a student typically. And you can put that in the beginning of the campaign so they respond positively to the direct mail piece, which they've already been giving through. You can do that through paid digital ads. You can do that through social media, whatever you want to do. But you're, again, putting that donor's behavior at the center and then putting a strategy around that, right? And you can interchange those mediums however you want. But that's our approach. We agree 100% with this consultant in that you can talk to people and get them warm to react a certain way from many different channels with one message.
Yeah, and it also feeds into kind of the whole attribution question, which is an entirely different conversation. But that's one of the things that, our colleagues in business intelligence have built us dashboards where we can look at things like influence giving, right? So it's not direct to appeal giving, but we take a look at a given audience and during the campaign timeline, how many of those people made a gift? How many of them did the thing we were asking them to do, regardless of if it came in on a trackable link? It gives us a much clearer snapshot that, all of those channels in concert and the omni-channel fashion Angie was talking about, that's the key. That's important. So we got just a little plug for some of our colleagues are doing a webinar here. I'll let Anshu explain about that, and then we'll close out.
Yeah, all right. So we've got an exciting webinar coming up with our very own Kara Wagner, Associate Vice President, and Jen Wood, Senior Managing Vice President, for an exclusive look at the results of the 2025 BWF Healthcare Survey, moderated by Mark Marshall, who's our Chief Strategy Officer and co-owner. For more than 25 years, the BWF has surveyed affluent Americans to understand their motivations for giving healthcare organizations. And this year's findings reveals a significant shift in donor demographics, motivations, and expectations, with younger, more digitally engaged donors playing a growing influential role. So tying in, very well what we're talking about today. And this session explores a couple of key trends and themes that are impacting the healthcare giving in 2025, what motivates affluent donors today and what turns them away, the rise of the next generation of donors and how they engage and how to engage with them more effectively, and the importance of storytelling, stewardship, and personalization, all wrapped up in technology's expanding role in donor communications and pipeline development. So, backed by this comparative insights from the Giving USA 2025 report, the AFP fundraising effectiveness project, the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. This webinar is helping healthcare fundraisers and nonprofit leaders sharpen their strategies, align messages with donor expectations, and build durable relationships in a shifting philanthropic environment. So, whether you're representing a community hospital foundation, an academic medical center, or a specialty care provider, this session offers a data-driven insights to inform your next move and grow your impact. So, thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciated all the questions and the feedback. And Zach, I'll let you wrap it up.
Yeah, no, thank you so much to everybody for your time today. We covered a lot of ground, smarter tools, automation, audience first storytelling, you name it. Again, if there's one theme that runs through all of this, it's that the best annual giving teams are not doing more. That's not really the solution. They're doing the right things consistently and with purpose. And honestly, if you are here, if you're attending this, you're part of that group. So kudos to you. You were in that mindset, thinking how to evolve, thinking how to work more efficiently, build better systems, and ultimately connect more deeply with our donors, right? That is the work that is going to define the next generation of annual giving. So we would really love to keep the conversation going. We've got our emails here, but also our LinkedIn profiles. You can scan the QR codes. Totally serious. Connect with us. We'd love to hear from you about what we talked about that really resonated. Let's just keep that conversation going because one of the things we love about this space is it moves fast, but we all do better and we perform better when we are sharing the information with one another. So thank you again for spending part of your day with us. We'll send the recording and the resources your way soon. Until then, keep experimenting, keep simplifying, and keep doing the work that moves people to support your organizations. Thank you, everybody. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone. Have a great rest of your day.